Greetings and welcome, I'm Ash, and today I think you should try Darkest Dungeon, a brutally difficult turn-based RPG that features numerous roguelike elements, a gorgeous art style filled with Lovecraftian horrors, and a story that manages to stick to the back lines yet still draw you ever forward in an effort to plunder its secrets. The first thing worth mentioning is that when I said brutally difficult, I was not exaggerating. Darkest Dungeon preys on the weak, by which I mean the moment your party starts to crumble and the once noble crusaders lose their wits, the inevitability of defeat will begin looming oppressively over your head. The lucky ones will be the first to die from the ghoulish horrors, while those less fortunate will return back to the hamlet not as men, but as gibbering lunatics forever scarred by the things they have witnessed. It is easy to get attached to your characters, especially since they will constantly be skirting death's door and thus producing some rather exciting tales of heroism and perseverance in the face of oblivion. But it's probably for the best if you consider them expendable, as that is exactly what they are. No matter how much gold you invest into equipment and training, and no matter how much experience your characters have, there is always that chance they will not return from their mission, and this is a reality you need to be prepared for. While I would never advocate save scumming, mostly because it tends to make the whole experience a rather boring one without the player ever realizing why, I would recommend you do so for Darkest Dungeon if you simply can't be bothered re-leveling and equipping your entire party over and over again. I personally managed to resist the temptation until I finally wandered into the final Darkest Dungeon and realized that it's not actually that much fun spending 2 hours equipping a party, only to have them die within 10 minutes on stuff I couldn't have possibly known about without sending a well-equipped team in there simply to die. Now that I've gotten the one big issue out of the way, allow me to tell you why I enjoy playing Darkest Dungeon and why I continuously keep creating new save files just to experiencing anew. The first reason, and this one should be obvious to anyone that ever saw a single YouTube clip of it, is the stellar audiovisual design that somehow manages to get me immersed into a world I know nothing about, and characters that have literally zero personality outside of the ones I give them. The art style is dark and gloomy, and even intentionally ugly on occasion, and it perfectly conveys the oppressive nature of your nearly impossible quest to oust the creatures of nightmare from the once beautiful places that are now nothing more than a spawning ground for corruption. Your noble characters are all clearly mad, or driven by motives that are less than virtuous, which would be the only realistic explanation for why anyone would volunteer to go to the gates of hell itself armed with a toothpick and a bit of goodwill. It is because of this that I never feel strange when they panic in a dangerous situation. They aren't the chosen heroes sent here to save the world from a great evil. They are an expendable bunch of fools that have decided to stake their lives and sanity for a small sack of gold, and they are fully aware of this fact. But perhaps the best part of Darkest Dungeon, in terms of design anyway, is the gravelly voiced narrator that always manages to make each event happening on screen that much more important. Entering a corrupted forest at night would be terrifying enough on its own, but when you hear something along the lines of "There is method to the wild corruption here, it bears a form both wretched and malevolent," you know that the situation is dire and that you are in for one hell of a fight. As for the actual gameplay, it comes in 2 stages. During your stay at the hamlet, you will need to send your wounded to the hospital, the highly stressed ones to the bar in order to hopefully get them to forget the monstrosities they faced, use the blacksmith and guild halls to improve your fighting skills, and so forth. All of this costs money, and a lot of it, so each character is a steep investment that will need to be protected at all costs, or you might find your already dismal treasure trove rapidly depleting itself. And if you thought those would be your only expenses, I'm afraid you'd be terribly wrong, as each of your trips into the accursed manor and its surrounding areas will require a great deal of supplies. Rather expensive supplies provided by the only merchant in town. The only thing that you can bring with you into the dungeon without going bankrupt are the trinkets, items with powerful effects and equally harsh downsides. While they sound like a great idea, in truth the trinket system is by far the weakest part of Darkest Dungeon, since your choices are limited to only a couple of really good ones, with the rest being garbage you peddle to the local gypsy at the hamlet. An unfortunate reality to an otherwise great game, but it is what it is. With your team well rested, their supplies firmly packed and hopes raised high, it is time to start the actual gameplay portion of the Darkest Dungeon. By which I mean wander blindly through the dark halls and twisted pathways in hopes of the enemies you bump into being more startled than you are. If you decide to constantly keep your torches well lit, you will enjoy a greater scouting chance, your characters will be more relaxed, and your chance at ambushing the opposition will increase significantly. Though all of this comes at a cost of burning through your rather meager supply of torches. On the other hand, if you decide that torches are for wimps, you can stumble around through the dark, which means your heroes will stress out more often, and the monsters will mostly have an advantage over you when it comes to initiating battles. But the reward is a greatly increased amount of treasure you can find because, well, it's a video game. Another benefit of doing things hardcore is that your pack size is fairly limited, so if you want to bring back home tons and tons of treasure, as you would, you will need to dump some of your supplies, which isn't as much of an issue when you aren't carrying a ton of bulky torches in your backpack. Along your journey throughout the dungeon, you will find various cursed objects, altars to the dark gods, or just malformed scraps of nature still clinging to life. All of these have a chance to bestow upon you a great boon, or even just loot, but also a massively negative effect that could potentially result in your demise. In order to activate these curios without them dishing out a healthy dosage of the plague upon your characters, you will need a specific item, each one corresponding to a specific curio. What this means is that if you want to salvage as much loot as possible, you will need to further limit your pack size with useless items such as holy water, shovels, and so forth. It might not sound like much, but it is this sort of decision making that makes Darkest Dungeon such a fantastic game for me. Do you risk the safety of your mission by dropping potentially crucial bandages in order to grab even more loot, or do you go for the safe approach and simply try to survive to the very end? Do you risk potentially massive gains by keeping your supply of anti-venom, or do you simply drop it all for guaranteed but significantly smaller amounts of gold? Oh, decisions. All of that, however, plays second fiddle to the main aspect of the Darkest Dungeon, the combat. As you might already know, it's a fairly standard turn-based affair, though I have to commend the developers for the nearly impeccable balance, as I've never had a character that felt useless or completely without a role. Some are stronger against groups, others against certain bulky enemies, and a couple only function in specific configurations, but the important thing is that every single one of them is viable. Most of this comes down to the fact that each character has a set of 7 spells and abilities, most of which are designed around 2 different styles of play. There are some that are mostly melee oriented and require your character to stand in the first 2 positions in order to hit the enemy, while another configuration of spells will enable the hero to stand in the back lines and transition into a more of a support role with plentiful buffs and protection effects. Add to this enemies that are genuinely tough and attack not only your health pool but also your sanity, and you have a combat system that doesn't become less interesting the further on you go, but quite the opposite. Once you stop doing the short and easy missions, you will begin seeing enemies that are far stronger than you, enemies that require special tactics and excellent use of all your available resources in order to beat them without losing most of your health in the process. I could talk about the combat in the Darkest Dungeon for hours, but in an effort to keep this video as brief as possible, allow me to simply say that no matter how strong you are, there will always be some sort of a way to challenge yourself, either by fighting the rather nasty bosses, or by embarking on extremely long missions against equally deadly enemies. With plenty of characters to choose from, team compositions to create, and a wide assortment of enemies to fight, I can comfortably say that the Darkest Dungeon has some of the most engaging turn-based combat in recent time. Darkest Dungeon is a deeply flawed game when it comes to difficulty, and it might occasionally anger you enough to simply rage quit from your playthrough, but if you can get past that, you'll find a turn-based RPG with incredible depth, an intriguing combat system, and so much grim charm that it's difficult to put down once you get a couple of dungeons under your belt. If you enjoy difficult roguelike games or tricky turn-based combat in general, then I do believe you should try Darkest Dungeon. It is an excellent game. Despite its shortcomings and relatively frequent updates, it has managed to stay consistently fresh and exciting for me, and hopefully it'll do the same to you. Thank you guys for listening, and if you enjoyed this, or even if you didn't, please do let me know. And if you would like to see more, you can either subscribe here, or you can check out the website linked down below. That one tends to be updated a lot more frequently. With all of that said, I hope you guys have a nice day, and I will see you soon with Total War Warhammer. See ya!